Kristie, thank you so much for joining us. You've been leading diversity and inclusion at NFI for over 3 years now, which in today's business climate is no small feat. So let's dive in. Can you start by telling us a little bit about your role at NFI?
My name is Kristie Maciolek Small. I'm the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion at NFI Industries. When I came to NFI, we already had a lot of great diversity and inclusion initiatives. And I think what I did or what I brought to the company was to turn that into a strategy and help us answer the why. Why were we doing all of these great things? What are we trying to accomplish and advance as a company? So that's been the driving goal of the work I've been doing. And we've had some great successes over the last 3 years that I'm very proud of.
How would you say that the definition or priority of diversity and inclusion has shifted, particularly for frontline roles during your time there?
I'm very lucky to say that at NFI, we have not made any major adjustments to how we implement diversity and inclusion or how we value it as a company. It absolutely aligns with our values and how we do business. And we recognize that it's important for all of our employees, including our frontline employees. I don't know, Julia, if I've ever also told you that I was a lawyer for most of my career. So
Yes.
a lot of the work that we do in diversity and inclusion absolutely is done to make sure it's legal, aligned with our obligations as an equal opportunity employer, and does not cross the line into anything that looks like quotas or illegal discrimination. And because I've always brought that to the work, we never really had to make an adjustment, even though there's these new restraints and pullback in light of some of the executive orders. So we have a full commitment from the leadership of NFI to keep doing what we have been doing, which is consistent with the law.
For frontline workers in particular, they often don't have laptops, company email, or a seat in headquarters. What is your approach to building a culture of inclusion for folks who are both physically and structurally disconnected from the corporate center of the company?
Thank you for asking about how we include our frontline employees in our diversity work. I think WorkStep and NFI share the same belief that our frontline employees are really our bottom line and are incredibly important to the success of the business. I actually am here today at one of our site locations doing this interview because I'd rather be at a location where the work's getting done than in a corporate office while we're talking about our frontline employees. What I would like to say first is it's not easy. It's not easy to reach all of our 18,000 employees in locations across the US and Canada, especially because they don't have computers, they don't have apps, and there's not an easy way of meaningful and repetitive communication. But we've really implemented some successful ways to connect with our frontline employees, and I'd be happy to share some of those examples with you.
You're reading my mind. That was going to be my next question. In the past, you've shared that NFI is focused on real change, not performative policies. So I was hoping that you'd be able to share an example of an initiative that's directly improved the experience or retention of frontline employees.
Absolutely. Let's start with it only happens with the support of the people who are in the field. And that's general managers, transportation managers, site leads, and our HR ops partners in the field. Because a diversity and inclusion team that sits in corporate cannot effectively lead change across the whole company, right? So these are all examples where I got to partner with great people in NFI. The first one that I want to share with you is a really simple idea, but it's really made a difference. And we call it celebrations in a box. What this is each cultural celebration, we partner with our employee resource group to create a curated box of items, not just decorations, but also educational ideas, toys, books, resources. And those middle managers right in the field can hit one button and order their celebration in a box for Hispanic Heritage Month, for example. There's a lot of interest in advancing this diversity and inclusion across the company, but we know that our middle managers have a lot on their plate. So this makes it really easy for them to engage in a meaningful way with content that has been curated by subject matter experts from our employee resource group. And we have seen so much adoption of these celebrations in a box. At this site today, I'm going to take some footage to share with you all what that looks like for Hispanic Heritage Month. But even with that story, and it might seem so simple that, oh, we're decorating for Hispanic Heritage Month or Black History Month or Women's History Month. We also did one for mental health, and we're doing a one with our young professionals later this year. It matters to the employees that are here. It matters that their culture is represented, that their culture is celebrated, and that their culture is part of these celebrations in a box. And this location I came to in particular because this is our second year doing Hispanic Heritage Month. And when we did the celebration in a box here for Hispanic Heritage Month last year, the general manager got a huge amount of support from the workforce. And he saw a level of pride on the employees when they walked in the door and they saw the flag that represented their country of origin. So much so that he went out and he bought flags to represent the country of origin of every one of his employees. And he hung them here in the warehouse and got to sort of celebrate all of the employees and their cultural differences. And I love that story because it shows how something as simple as a celebration in a box allowed there to be true engagement and communication and to further inspire that general manager to keep growing and building upon that, really recognizing everybody. So that's the long story for the celebration in a box, but it's continuing to grow and it's really made an impact across the company. I really want to turn this into ideas that are tangible and actionable. Like you said earlier before, not just sort of theoretical, but what everybody could actually do. And so one of the things we did last year is we set a goal for all of our HR business partners in their field locations to partner with the business leads to host two diversity related events. And guess what? They all did. 100% completion. Every one of our sites had diversity events last year. So much so that we actually didn't have to set the goal again this year because it's part of their standard work now. So, things that might be done in corporate, things that might be getting done by the employee resource groups are very easy to replicate and engage with at a site location. And so that goal really made it just part of the work and not anything extra. And is really something I'm proud of to be able to partner with those HR business partners. In addition, my team prepares a monthly one-pager diversity newsletter that gets posted on the employee information board every month. We produce it in English and in Spanish. And I think that's important to make sure that it's inclusive for all of our workforce. And then our executive D&I council last year did a D&I road trip, and we actually went to 9 locations in 1 month and met with our frontline employees and talked to them about their engagement with our diversity and inclusion work and their thoughts about what we could or should be doing. So we got some actionable feedback from them. Now, all of this doesn't solve for everything. And you might notice that I didn't mention our employee resource groups with our frontline employees. Some of our frontline employees are engaged in the employee resource groups, but it's not as easy because they don't have time off the floor to engage fully. They're not in our Google Spaces or other communications. So there is some engagement, but I often think that the employee resource groups aren't the only solution for how we connect with our frontline employees. So I try to come up with very specific initiatives that reach our frontline employees in a meaningful way for them.
Shifting gears a little bit, we're seeing national conversations and legislation shift under the new administration. What effects are you seeing from policy changes on your diversity and inclusion work at NFI or from industry peers at their companies?
It's definitely something that we're monitoring, and I'm staying in, constant contact with any changes in regulations or the laws or things that are issued from the appropriate government agencies. When I speak about those decisions that are coming out of the government, I really believe that they are based on some incorrect assumptions about diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And those assumptions sometimes circle around the idea that we're trying to fill a quota or that it's wasteful spending or it only benefits one group. And I could tell you clearly with our diversity strategy at NFI, none of those three assumptions are correct. So when it comes to the idea of a quota, we've never had quotas. We never will have quotas. We always make all employment decisions without regard to any protected characteristics, including gender, race, ethnicity, disability status, etc. I also lead the talent acquisition group, so I can say this definitively. Our goal is to put the right person in the right job at the right time. And then secondly, this whole concept that it only helps some groups and disadvantages others is completely wrong. Our whole diversity strategy is for the entire workforce. Our engagement in our employee resource groups is a prime example that they are open to all of our employees and have a high level of engagement from different employees throughout the company. Our employee resource groups are based on career, community, and culture. And building those help everybody in the company, not just specific people. So when I speak about what's happening outside of the four walls of NFI, I absolutely recognize it. I appreciate it. We make sure that our actions align with anything that's issued from the government. But at the same time, I recognize that our work still continues because it's the right thing to do for our business and it's the right thing to do for our workforce.
I completely agree with everything that you said and really appreciate your sharing. What advice would you give to other diversity and inclusion leaders as they look to implement programs at their companies?
I've spoken to people at all different companies and all different levels of their engagement, diversity, and inclusion. When it comes to starting something, starting something is always harder than continuing something. So there's often this intimidation or fear. And my advice to people is find the right thing that resonates with your company's culture. You do not have to do everything at once. But if you can identify one or two efforts that align with your company culture and move those forward, it becomes something that then you can build upon. So, if your company really has a family value or is really committed to military or has a learning culture, it's very easy to select one or two initiatives and do amazing, hit it out of the park instead of just trying to do everything at once. So that's the advice I give to people when they start. Second piece of advice I give them is it goes back to that world of really knowing the culture that you're working in because the diversity and inclusion work can be challenging. And there is an ability to try to move things one step forward and you actually go two steps back. So you have to exercise like high emotional intelligence and really understand where your company is and how your initiative benefits that company. Don't try to do everything at once. Really make sure that you have this continuous assessment of the culture and the buy-ins that things are successful.
Last question for you. Looking ahead to 2026, is there a goal or initiative around diversity and inclusion that you're most excited to pursue, especially for your frontline workforce?
There are two things that I'm excited to explore. One is I am adamant on continuing to explore a way where we can engage our frontline employees in continuous communication. Either that's through our ERGs or through other text communications, because you can't just send a message about this once. It has to sort of be this dialogue and repetition. So I'd love to still solve for this. And I'm sure the people watching this video would love to be able to solve for a way to have meaningful communications with our frontline employees. So that might be an aspirational goal of mine. The second goal that I really think we're going to be able to accomplish in 2026 relates to a story as well. So you heard me talk about the celebrations in a box and about how we take different celebrations and provide curated kits for our locations to engage with their frontline employees. We had a startup in our industry. There's a lot of startups. So we had a startup where the customer was there right at the beginning. And that customer walked in and they saw decorations for, I believe it was Asian American Pacific Islander Month. They saw the diversity newsletter and they saw other elements in the workspace supporting our diversity and inclusion strategy. And that customer loved it and was so excited about what we were doing. And the feedback from that actually made me think that it is easier to build a culture of inclusion from the beginning than to change a culture into an inclusive culture. So I would like in 2026 to design a celebration in a box, but that is for a startup, and to have an initiative that embeds the culture with diversity and inclusion right from the beginning and to hit all of the startups as they're rolling it.
Love that.
What do you
That's
think, Julie? Is that a good idea?
a great idea. Let us know what you come up with.
You know how hard and how busy startups are at the time. So, it might have to be a couple weeks after they get rolling because there's a lot of moving pieces and you're trying to train people on a lot of things at the time. But really made me reflect that you want to build it from the beginning, then try to change a culture.
Kristie, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your expertise. Love to hear about the work you're doing to build more inclusive and resilient frontline teams. Thanks again for sharing with us.
I appreciate it. And I appreciate the partnership.